Greetings and welcome back to Reach Your Dew Point. I am your humble host, Roy Atkinson, and today I am with Ken Gonzalez, otherwise known as Ken Gon, and it's a pleasure to have Ken here. He's a recognized industry expert, leader in outside-in thinking, and we'll talk about that, lean and service management, and is regularly invited to write and give presentations internationally, and occasionally show up on a podcast or two. And I have been in the habit of grabbing snippets from people's LinkedIn profiles, and I grabbed one from Ken, and it says, "My perspective is valued because of my ability to help practitioners and customers alike better understand and apply these principles to deliver value and tangible results." Welcome, Ken.
Thank you,
Good
Roy.
to see
it's
you,
great
sir.
to be here with you.
So you mentioned on your LinkedIn profile outside-in thinking, and I believe I told you that as I was speaking in the UK recently, I mentioned inside out and outside in, and the room kind of went, "What?" And so even after all these years that you and I and many others have been talking about outside in and inside out thinking, I had to define it for the people in the room. They're knowledgeable people. They're attending a service management conference and they're pretty sharp. So maybe tell me a little bit more about what outside in thinking means to you and why it's important.
Sure, I'd be happy to do that. And it's a question I've gotten a number of different times over the course of my work and my career. The thing that I would like to say about it is that this is a perspective. So both outside in and inside out are different perspectives. And the thing that distinguishes the two is outside in looks at things from the perspective of the person that's consuming or using whatever it is that they're engaging with. So this could be a product, it could be a service, or it could be some combination of both, which from a mechanical perspective is the most common perspective or the most common scenario, where there are very few examples of things, at least especially in the IT world, where it's all product or all service. There's always going to be a mix of the two. So outside in thinking stands and looks at from the customer's perspective. And I've also referred to this as customer centricity and provider centricity, because I think in a certain sense, a number of people would probably have a more tangible connection to that as opposed to outside in or inside out.
Well, I think that's clear enough for people to get a hold of. So taking the customer perspective is important because it gives us a sense of what they're experiencing that we can't understand unless we ask them, right? We have to ask them about it and let them tell us what they're experiencing.
Yeah.
Cool.
In a lot of cases, what I find is that people will talk about experience design. Like, oh, we care about the customer experience. And the thing I find that is if you don't get your head straight about the perspective that you're looking from, your experience of experience design might actually be significantly different than what the customer's actually experiencing. And it seems like, well, water's wet, rocks are hard. It should be easy, but it's not, because it requires a shift to go from the typical provider-centric view, which is what we think about it, to what the customer actually thinks about it. And if you don't make that mental shift, your being able to translate their experience could actually go rather poorly. And in worst case scenario, might actually mislead you into taking an action that you think is going to benefit the experience, but actually degrades the experience.
Yeah, that's a great point. And just on a similar subject, recently I was judging some awards for customer experience awards in a particular category, and I noticed that a lot of the submissions from tech companies spent 85% of their time in their award submission talking about the technology and maybe mentioned the customer perspective and some metrics that they had gathered around the customer satisfaction or some customer experience metrics. So there's still an awful lot of organizations out there that don't see the outside inside of things. So if you were to try to get an organization on track to look at things from the customer perspective. Most organizations, not every organization, but most organizations have what they call a vision statement, what they call a mission statement. Can you talk a little bit about that and where you think the perspective, that outside in perspective, would fall in terms of those statements, organizational statements that they have?
Yeah, sure. So I think that this is an area that I think confuses a lot of people, where when they think about planning for what they would like to do and the things that they would like to offer to people, they often will start with, oh, I have a vision statement. And for the most part, if you just look back in management history over time, vision statements actually came from the work that it was around the time that Deming was doing his work in Japan, where Japanese were using vision statements to have a bold view of the future to live into, not necessarily something that they intended to accomplish over a specific period of time. And that got adapted and, shall I say, even corrupted by turning that into, now we're going to live into this thing and somehow make it real. But oftentimes that's just really not the case. You do not have the ability to fully execute on the vision statement. You can identify and say, yeah, this is directionally correct what we're doing. If all the circumstances lined up and over a period of time, then we might actually realize that vision. But the vision statement is about being able to tap into inspiration. It's about to give you and your team members something to be playing for that's other than short-term results. And I think that's actually a really good thing. The thing that is, I think, more important to keep in mind is the mission statement. The mission statement is really organized around our organization exists for a purpose. What is that purpose? That purpose is actually embedded in the mission. So a good mission statement will actually let you know who you are, what you do, and who you do it for, in a way that everybody that is part of the organization, that is a team member, would be able to look at that and say, oh yeah, this is my piece of what it actually takes to fulfill the mission. And to the extent that everybody on the team can actually say that, and that those collective actions actually roll up into the kinds of results that a customer says, this is great, I'm getting exactly what I need. To the extent that that happens, you're doing a great job. I find often that either, number one, you don't actually have a mission statement, or number two, you may have a mission statement, but you default to traditional planning approaches, which are organized around functional areas inside of an organization. And the mission ends up being compromised because people run their silo the way that they think they should be running their silo, without regards to what the organization as a whole and the person you serve needs to have in order to be successful. And this is where we make the bridge into inside out thinking, which is, hey, this is about our technology, or this is about our processes, or this is about something other than what actually tangibly contributes to what the person who's consuming the thing or service actually needs to get in order to be successful at what they're doing. So this is distinctly not a technology thing. Rather, it can be applied anywhere in an organization to any customer or stakeholder community that you would care to want to serve. And I think in that way, we have a now solid foundation for being able to talk about who we are, what we do, and what does it look like to actually be successful. The other thing that I'll call out here is that oftentimes, whether it's, I said that the provider and consumer perspectives are both required. And one could listen to this as saying, oh, well, if I just look at it from what does the customer need, then we're good. No, that's, and to be a little bit crass about it, somebody that I know often said, being half-assed is just as bad whichever cheek you have left. So being provider-centric and leaving the customer-centric off is no good. Being customer-centric without considering what a provider needs is also bad. Why? Because providers are not, probably like 1 in 1 million, are in a position where, oh, we can do whatever we want. as a provider. We could lose money and be historically bad at it, but if the customer's happy, we're happy. Providers often have a set of constraints, a set of, we need to make some amount of money to show that we're actually, able to pay salaries and afford infrastructure or trucks or, whatever your example of infrastructure is. So if you're not being concerned with what the customer needs or what the provider side of the equation requires, you're leaving out an important part of what needs to be considered. So it's more like having a holistic view of things rather than just, take one perspective and then write it into the ground.
Which points up the fact that businesses ultimately, it depends on a relationship. I have things to bring to the relationship, and I have things that I require to get out of the relationship in order to make it work. Going back to the mission statement idea, there are frightfully few people within organizations who are employees of the organization who maybe are aware of a mission statement or understand what the mission statement is or can talk about the mission statement with any coherence. And, one of the examples that has come up many times is Johnsonville brats, Johnsonville sausages, where every employee knows the mission statement and they all have it on their business cards and they can tell you what it is without looking, which is pretty darn cool, I think. And that's a worthwhile thing to do, I think, from the perspective of a provider, as you call them. So, speaking of looking from outside in and inside out, you have been working on a project that falls out of the music side of your interests, and you've been looking at a particular website for a particular reason, and maybe you can talk about that a little bit. It has to do with those flat black things with grooves in them that go around in circles.
Yeah, exactly. So this particular project is literally now right in the middle of launching, called My Vinyl Catalog. And this particular site is organized around vinyl collectors and being able to give them tools to easily and quickly be able to get their collections under control, so that if I'm out at an event, I was actually out this past weekend at an event where a bunch of vinyl sellers showed up. They had albums, and I sat there using my app to look to see what albums I actually had as part of my collection. And the great thing about it is if I've got duplicates, well, I may have a duplicate for a reason, right? It might be a rare pressing, or it might be better condition. I might have very good reasons for getting a duplicate, but for the most part, I try not to. There are specific things I want to look for, so I'll have a want list, and I can go consult my want list and see, is this thing on it? And for me, starting this off, I never really had planned on it, but as part of my career arc, I actually started in software development and somehow managed to pivot into operations at some point. And I don't actually remember how that happened, but it did. And when I left Gartner, I was really intent on kind of getting the development part of my life back and reclaiming that. I did not know where that was going to start. So I just okay, great. I could state that as a direction and then start thinking about it. And as I started collecting vinyl, I thought to myself, there's got to be a better way than this, because trying to track things through spreadsheets wasn't working. There's a service called Discogs that's basically the largest online catalog of pressed vinyl on the planet, where they also do commerce. And that's really, I think, their primary objective is to the buying and selling of vinyl online. And that's great. But from a collector's perspective, trying to use that tooling to manage the collection, entirely painful. I was like, there's got to be a better way. Well, I looked around and I found that there really wasn't a better way. And then that's when what if there was an easy button? What would that be like? What would I want? And that's when it clicked for me. And I was like, okay, great. This is something I could actually sink my teeth into, that I didn't really care at the start whether anybody else would want to use it or not. But I knew that I would use it, and I would use it as a tool for, getting the reps in to refresh my skills with modern software development, and then start using it. And as I started into it and started building it out, I was like, a lot of people are probably going to want to use this. So I productized it. And now, again, right in the middle of launch. So probably by the time this episode airs, I'll already be having ads launched on Facebook, Instagram, and some of the other popular locations where people that do vinyl show up. I've got a whole program established around record shops and vendors to do outreach and want to, partner with them. So I'm pretty bullish about this because it's something that's definitely a passion project for me and something that I've been living the value on. So it's pretty exciting. I'm pretty happy about it.
It is exciting. And it's even exciting for me because I've got a couple of albums floating around out there in the ether from my music days. And, I know they're on Discog, so maybe they'll turn up on your tool too. I have a similar thing, a similar little app called Library Thing, which is awesome for cataloging books, of which I have a few. I mean, as you can see some of them in the background here, but that is one bookshelf of 4 in this office, and there's probably 10 other bookshelves in the house that are absolutely packed with goodies, and it's a little tough to keep track of hundreds and hundreds of books. And Library Thing makes it easy to do. Shoot the ISBN code and bang, it's in your library. It's pretty neat. So that's the kind of thing you're looking to do with albums. Well, there you go. There we go. So speaking of easy things to do, we have arrived at a time when technology can make things easy and maybe too easy in a lot of cases, but certainly AI can ease a lot of operations, and it's everywhere. It's embedded in everything, whether we like it or we don't. And some people seem to be really grabbing onto it and using it a lot, maybe too much. Some of it seem to have found good ways to put it to use. And a lot of people are concerned, certainly in the service and support area, about job losses and career paths and that type of thing. So one of the big questions that comes up is, in the age of AI, how do we differentiate the human side of work from the things that AI can do, if we can? And I know you have thoughts about that.
Yeah, I do. Because, a lot of the work that I'm doing with my customers today from an advisory and analyst perspective is around being able to make sense of AI. For the most part, the thing that I find is that this current state of the market is around vendors who've invested a lot of money in technology products. And not to say that those technology products are bad or no longer useful, but the default move has been to, let me add AI to an existing product. So you're using a limited set of data and the capabilities of these various AI, and I'll refer to them as engines, just because it's easier that way, because there's a large category of things that actually fall under engine technology. But we're now going to use these engines to look at the proprietary data that we have based upon how our customers actually use our products. And we're going to help them be better by bringing these two things together. And I think that's a great thing to do. And it's insufficient. Because when you get right down to it, the economics, the pricing models, the benefits that you should get from this have been fairly inconsistent. And it's really difficult to figure out what the pricing model should actually be for this. You can talk about like a vendor like Microsoft, and I'm just going to pick on them for a moment, not because I think that they do a bad thing, but just because they're an example of somebody that goes, hey, we have Copilot and all this other stuff. And, Mr. Customer, Ms. Customer, if you just buy our thing, we're going to give you a flat pricing, and this is what it looks like. And these are all the things you can consume, and things will be great. Okay, maybe. we don't actually have proof that that is the case. But, it's, I think, an assertion worth making on their part, because they're really in for a penny, in for a pound. They're going full tilt boogie at making that part of the suite, and a reason why they should extract more money from their customer to be able to make that work. Now, the whole thing around the Copilot, I think that it does point directionally towards the idea should be around collaboration and being able to take work that is essentially repeatable, that can be driven off of data, that can do the things that these engines are well built to do, like handling large stacks of data and synthesizing it, or doing analysis, or preparing reports. Those things are things that these technologies are really good at. Can they actually replace human judgment? At this point, I would say absolutely not. There are things that people can do, making architectural choices, being able to get at what will actually have value to a particular customer, and then validating that with the customer, because it requires a relationship between the parties. AI is not going to do that. We are not at a point where the AI engines can do the same things that people can do. And despite the number of people that have been talking about the advent of artificial general intelligence, I think we're still a long way off from that. That point being made, there's still a lot of things that AI is good at, which we should let it be good at, which we should take advantage of. There are a lot of things that people are good at. We should let people do that. The trick now becomes looking at, again, going back to mission, right? So our organization has a mission, and we're going to fulfill that mission. Who and what do we need in order to do that well? So it really is changing the face of work. It's changing the thing that we call a job. What does it mean now to be employed? So if I'm a senior software developer, I'd probably be shaking in my boots, because a lot of the things I used to be able to do that now meant I'm going to make a lot of money, like experience with various programming languages and knowing the intricacies of how to, do things. Okay. I now have AI technology that will let me do that. So what is my value to the organization that I'm working in? If you are unable to communicate that, if you are unable to recognize that for yourself, you are compromised. And I don't care what your job is, what your role is, we need to be thinking about it from that perspective. What are the things that people are good at that we are good at? Communication, relationship, all those kind of things that are about what people can do. We need to be doubling down on that, because that's really going to be the long-term source of where we can produce value using these technology components as a way of being able to help us eliminate the trivial, eliminate the things that take a lot of repetitive effort, but deliver a finite amount of value. This is really the core, what we need to focus on now to ensure that as we move forward into the future, we've got a stable foundation. And the last comment that I'll make about this is a lot of people think that, wow, just in the last 12 months, we've taken a lot of ground with AI. And we have, no doubt. But we are still early in this journey. There's a lot more we're going to see. So to think that, okay, we now have a stable foundation and I can now turn this into the new normal and that's what it's going to be. No, that would be a significant error. We are going to continue to see innovation. We are going to continue to see new technology, even like things with spec-driven development. A lot of people have been working in this area, and even some stuff that's been happening in the past 90 days is now proving to be, that's now over. Now something else has emerged, because there's going to be a lot of experimentation. There's going to be a lot of people coming to bring new ideas to the area. And we need to necessarily be following all of those ideas all at once, but we need to devote at least a portion of our time to understanding what the large movements are in the space, so that when we're considering what the impact is on us as individuals and what we do and how we help our organizations be successful, we're going to be better prepared to answer those questions and pivot as we go along, because really our ability to pivot is now going to be, I think, the thing that is the key differentiator.
And I think that a lot of the things that I've read that are very educational in terms of AI and how it's going and all that point out again and again the power of human plus AI. And some have gone so far as to say human plus AI beats AI every single time. And I think that's a very interesting point where the human perspective and the understanding of context, which AI doesn't necessarily do very well, in my opinion, can gain a lot. Human perspective being broader and more contextual. And in terms of how long this is going to take, I'll just say a word or two. I remember when Ray Kurzweil, who we probably are originally acquainted with from the world of music, because he musical instruments, of course. When he was originally playing around with AI, he was working on a project at a hospital in Massachusetts with which I had some knowledge. I had a connection there at the time. And this is back in the and Ray Kurzweil was working on what we now call natural language processing to allow doctors to make notes verbally. So basically speech to text, and fighting with the ideas of different accents at a hospital in Massachusetts where you had doctors from China, doctors from India, doctors who were from New England and would say, we have to start the medication, and doctors from other parts of the world. And just getting that much done is very difficult. And look how far we've come now, but how long it took. We're going back 40 years. So people are very optimistic if they think that the magic is going to happen next week. And speaking of the magic happening next week, who knows? Maybe we'll see myvinylcatalog.com hit the top downloads. So we'll look for that, Ken. Absolutely.
Excellent.
And I think we have a mutual friend named.
So anybody that would like to try it out is welcome to go. So, and I'd love to hear from people that give it a try.
We'll throw a link for that in the show notes, and we'll let people go play. Cool being myvinylcatalog.com, right? So, Ken, thank you so much for being here, taking the time out to do a little discussion about this, and for finding your dew point to get back to your development roots. I mean, that's a dew point right there, right? He's okay. I've been thinking about this and thinking about it now. I'm going to go do something. So welcome to Reach Your Dew Point, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Roy. It's definitely a pleasure. And anytime I have the opportunity to spend time with you, always high on my list of priorities.
Well, thank you very much. Talk to you soon.